Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 7th of July, 2023, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today, we've got Patrick Henningsen and Debi Evans. Welcome to the programme. Both, we're going to get straight on with the online safety bill. And this was being discussed in the House of Lords yesterday. As you can see, there were actually a few people turned up for that. So it was being debated yesterday, and the pressure on the government over online safety continues to build. And I think this is good news. But the fundamental issue that I've raised in the past still stands, and that is that the bill as it's currently drafted relies on extremely key but unknown details about which are only going to become clear after secondary legislation has been published at some point in the future. So this bill will go through with really a lot of its functionality not understood. And of course, Ofcom hasn't written the codes of practice, which will be enabled by this bill as well. So in the Lords yesterday, they were talking about exemptions on certain services from regulation under the Act. So here is Lord Allen of Hallam. He was saying there's a material risk that without further amendment or clarification, then Wikipedia and other similar services may feel they can no longer operate in the United Kingdom. So they're looking for exemptions for services which are considered to be non-commercial, but in the public interest. This was Lord Moylan. So we just heard from a Liberal Democrat. This is Lord Moylan, the Tory peer. The fact that the government have not come forward with any suggestions or amendments to address this at all is truly remarkable. So the problems still exist with the online safety bill with respect to freedom of speech and the regulatory burden on various platforms. But let's just keep in mind that the latest argument here is over encryption and privacy. So here is an open letter that's been published 2 days ago. I think this was Wednesday. Open letter from security and privacy researchers in relation to the online safety bill. And they're saying in this letter, we wish to highlight alarming misunderstandings and misconceptions around the online safety bill and its interaction with the privacy and security technologies that our daily online interactions and communication rely on. And they're basically saying that the government is, when in the drafting of this bill, is from a technological perspective illiterate, and therefore the bill is going to have a chilling effect on the way we do our daily business online. And of course, this is something we've been warning about at the UK Column for quite a long time. So we just put that back on screen again. Let's just have a look at the list of signatories. They're all various professors and PhDs from various universities right across the country, and in fact, not only in the United Kingdom. But in the meantime, here is Conservative Home and Siobhan Bailey, MP. The online safety bill lets enforce verification online and so give people more power, information and control. And so the moves to push for a sort of mandatory digital ID continue. This is what she said in her article in Conservative Home. Yet, as I exposed in my campaign about anonymous abuse, the elephant in the room is fake and anonymous accounts. Research from Clean Up the Internet found the ability to easily create anonymous, fake and deceptive social media accounts is a common enabler of pretty much every form of fraud perpetrated online. So the push for digital ID and verification of identity continues. But as we say, the issue of being able to encrypt your communications online is very much the main front in the battle of online safety at the moment. Well, Meredith Whittaker from Signal was interviewed on Channel 4 News yesterday. Let's just have a listen quickly to what she had to say.
There is no way to create a backdoor that only the good guys can walk through. And what's being proposed here in the context of end-to-end encryption is a backdoor. And we know from decades of history, from decades of serious research, that there's no such thing as a safe backdoor. If the British police can get in, hackers can get in. If the British police can get in, hostile nations can get in. If the British police can get in, Putin can get in, the Iranian government can get in, and others wanting to do harm can get in. So it's really important that we maintain the security and integrity of these systems.
So we have another clip to follow, but Patrick, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because, I mean, she absolutely has a point.
She does have a great point there. I can do without the hyperbole about the Putin and the Iranians wanting to do harm. How exactly were they going to do harm to the British public. But put that aside, she's talking about, things akin to, having government-approved spyware on your devices, so that the government can have a backdoor. Should the companies not want to play ball with the government on this, they might still be compelled to use some kind of a third-party tool or something like that. I don't know if you've heard anything along those lines.
Well, we certainly have, and we'll come on to that in 1 second. But of course, the person that was sitting beside her in that little interview was Damian Collins, MP, former chair of the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, and he has been a rabid proponent of this online harms legislation to shut down everything, shut down freedom of speech, shut down a whole lot of behaviour online. So let's just have a listen to how he came back at Meredith Whittaker and then how she retorted against him. Let's have a look at this.
Well, I agree with Meredith on that point. I mean, I don't think it would be safe to say there's a safe backdoor, because once you create it, other people will find it as well. That's why we're not going to ask companies to break encryption. What the regulator would do, I would imagine with a company like Signal, is when the regulator Ofcom is creating the codes of practice, they might say to Signal, well, what sort of data do you gather? And if Signal says, well, we don't gather data about people's messages, we can't possibly look at this. The regulator won't say you need to break encryption. It'll say that's fine, but you do have policies, let's say, on legal and appropriate use. How do you enforce those? What do you do?
None of that is specified in the bill, and this is our concern, because we hear things that are sensible like that from people like you, and then we look at the bill, and what is specified is a regime that would give Ofcom the power to demand that everyone in the UK download spyware that checks their messages before they're sent against a database of what is permissible to say and send and what is not permissible. And that is a precedent that authoritarian regimes are looking to the UK to set, to point to a liberal democracy that was the first to expand surveillance in the terms of the UN Human Rights Commissioner. This is unprecedented paradigm-shifting surveillance, and paradigm-shifting not in the good way.
So again, Patrick, it's hard to be able to argue with that point of view.
Yeah, so the problem we have with this is what happened in the U.S. is the government could say, "Oh, we're not, sharing this with anybody. It's strictly for, the FBI or something like that." And what you have is then governments trading this information and data between government agencies, totally out of public view, and also even so, a government's purchasing data that's been scraped by private companies for various reasons, could be for advertising or something like that, and then taking that data from third parties. So this is happening. It's just completely rife. So what she's talking about there is particularly egregious, and that's kind of some mandatory, government spyware on your device on the assumption that you might cause a crime. So there's the whole concept of probable cause is completely out the window.
Yes.
This is a fundamental alteration of our rights, going right back to the Magna Carta.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Let's just look at this, because we mentioned this a week or so ago, I think, because the Senate in France had agreed that police should be allowed to remotely activate phone cameras and microphones and spy on people. But now it has actually gone through the entire process, and this bill has become law. So let's just bring a quote on screen. During the debate on Wednesday, the members of Parliament in the camp of Emmanuel Macron inserted an amendment limiting the use of remote spying to, quote, when justified by the nature and seriousness of the crime and for strictly proportional duration. And they also noted that a judge must approve any use of the provision while the total duration of the surveillance cannot exceed 6 months. Nonetheless, this is a very dangerous and slippery slope. In the meantime, in the United States, this is an interesting story in AP. Judge limits Biden administration in working with social media companies. So a judge on Tuesday prohibited several federal agencies and officials of the Biden administration from working with social media companies over protected speech. And this is a decision is called a blow to censorship by one of the Republican officials whose lawsuit brought the ruling, says Associated Press. So this is a pretty good development on that side as well. The pushback continues. But I just wanted to bring this back on screen for a third time, so I do apologize. But this was the document that I put out on Monday, which I mistakenly put out on Monday because it turned out to be fake, saying that Emmanuel Macron was, in fact, restricting the use of internet for certain areas where there were trouble on the streets. And of course, that document proved to be a fake document. Nonetheless, French media showing that, in fact, he has refused to rule out this provision in the future. So I just wanted to highlight that. So let's bring it on screen, this quick quote here. If we do a translation: in the event of a crisis, Emmanuel Macron does not rule out cutting social networks. He said, we need to have a reflection on social networks, on the prohibitions that we must put in place. And when things get carried away, we may have to put ourselves in the position to regulate the internet or cut it off, is basically what he's saying there. So in the meantime, Patrick, what's going on with Julian Assange?
Urged a little over a week ago here, declassified UK, Matt Kennard, a very good report. And there seems to be some evidence here of something that we all suspected at the time, but we didn't quite have the exact receipts for it. Headline reads, Crown Prosecution Services has destroyed all records of Keir Starmer's 4 trips to Washington here. So this is regarding the U.S. records, which show Starmer met with Attorney General Eric Holder and a host of other American and British national security officials in Washington in 2011, when he was in charge of Julian Assange's proposed extradition to Sweden for the sort of fitted up sex case that ended up collapsing 3 times because there was no provenance to it. But nonetheless, so this is interesting. And here are the real points here. We'll bring these bullet points up one by one. And Starmer was in Washington 3 times while in charge of Assange's proposed extradition to Sweden. So clearly taking instructions from the U.S. government there, or some sort of collusion, perhaps. Starmer led a 5-person British delegation that met with Holder for 45 minutes in Washington on November of 2011. And furthermore, the delegation included the UK liaison prosecutor to the U.S. who dealt with extradition. So think about this for a minute. There was this denial that there was a plan to extradite. And this is why Julian Assange took refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, because he suspected that that was the case. This was all written off and, dismissed as a conspiracy theory at the time. Well, we have the receipts here. This is absolutely what was in the works. So the meeting also attended by the head of the DOJ's National Security Division. That's not trivial. And the CPS refuses to clarify to declassified UK if destruction of the Washington documents is a routine procedure. And the reason they were destroyed quite clearly is because they prove that there was a sort of advanced planning, advanced coordination, a conspiracy, if you will, to put Julian Assange either on indefinite arbitrary detention, which is the case according to the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, but not only that, but prepare the ground for extradition, whereby the British or the Swedes, turns out to be the British, would keep him on ice for as long as necessary that United States might need to bring him back. Now, Eric Holder's DOJ at the time under Obama didn't go for the superseding indictments and to go all out in terms of indictments to bring Assange to the U.S. at the time, but the Trump administration did. And what that tells us is that there was probably, this case had been prepared even in advance of Donald Trump. So that they just hadn't pulled the trigger yet. So this is interesting. And, one wonders, Mike, whether Keir Starmer was rewarded for this and other things, perhaps, because he sort of moved up in the world very soon after this.
Yeah, indeed. Good question. Right. So now let's move on. Patrick, you've been in Brussels this week discussing the World Health Organization pandemic treaty.
Yeah. We went to Brussels to the EU Parliament, my first time to the EU Parliament. The EU Parliament, the people's pushback against the WHO pandemic tyranny. We're talking about the pandemic treaty and the international health recommendations, stroke regulations here. And we can see the photo here in this article here. We'll summarize this in a minute, but that's a team of dissenting MEPs led by, of course, Christine Anderson from Germany there, but her colleagues from Romania, Croatia, and France. And now this is an interesting development because what was launched here was the European Citizens Initiative. Okay, so this is actually, I know this is going to sound like an oxymoron and a shock to people, but there are actually democratic mechanisms in the EU. I know it's shocking, but the European Citizens Initiative is one of them, whereby citizens can come together from multiple EU countries, which is what happened here, in order to bring an issue up and perhaps influence policy. This is, a revolutionary in terms of Brussels. Has happened before. I don't know about this issue here, and this is, you can see some of the people on the panel there. Nick Hudson in the foreground as well. Nathaniel Pawlowski, he is the son of the Canadian pastor Arthur Pawlowski from Canada. He's there as well. Fiona Hine, she's an activist from London on this issue. Andrew Bridgen, you can see in the background, and then Philip Cruz, Swiss lawyer, who also was with Doctors for COVID Ethics on one of the symposiums that you did, Mike, as well, that we did previously. So they all had an opportunity to speak. The MEPs were also giving statements on this, as are the activists here. There's more details forthcoming on this 21st Century Wire here. Andrew Bridgen gave a quick reaction to this after this session. It seemed like a really successful meeting overall to raise awareness. But here's what former Conservative MP, now Reclaim Party MP, Andrew Bridgen had to say. Andrew Bridgen, MP, how do you think the event went today, and what do you think the important takeaway points are for this?
Well, it's not the European Union, it's more like the United Nations itself, wasn't it? We've got a lot of nations from around the world. It's raising the profile. If the Citizens Initiative in the EU could work and stop the WHO power grab, I don't mind where it happens. We're all completely aligned. We all know the tyranny that's involved in what the WHO through the UN are doing to all our citizens. And I don't mind. I'm not proud. Wherever it stops, I'll fight and stop it. I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with my European colleagues, whether they're MEPs or members of their own local parliament. The sooner we turn the page on this dark chapter in our human history, the better for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.
So I had a discussion with Christina Anderson off stage afterwards, and she said, it's going to be difficult to get this issue out through the European Citizens Initiative. It's a challenge, no doubt about it. The odds are against them, but she believes, as do some of the other MEPs and panelists and activists, that by coming together, by bringing this coalition of lawyers, of MEPs, of European citizens, of activists, this broad-based coalition, and people from very different political stripes on this, coming together, they'll be able to even override the restrictions within the often undemocratic European Union in order to go straight to the public. And Philip Cruz, the lawyer from Switzerland, who's kind of leading, one of the leaders of the legal effort there, he said that by bringing this up as an international issue here, by using this platform, they'll be able to then push it into their national parliaments. And he said that's where it really needs to be on the national parliamentary level, your national and local government level. That's where the big difference is, because that's where the pushback, that's where you can exert your sovereignty against this clearly what is a WHO power grab to implement these pandemic regulations that give the WHO an unbelievable amount of power to declare a pandemic when it starts, when it finishes, vaccine mandates, restrictions, you name it. A treaty is legally binding under international law. So we have a year, more or less. It's going to come up again in May of 2024. So there is time. So this battle is not finished, even though the WHO's committee have backed down last week. It's not over yet. So they're not going to give up on this. So people need to remain vigilant and do follow some of the activists and the people who are championing this issue right now.
Yeah, okay. And just very briefly, Patrick, then we put this graphic on screen. Then I think you wanted to highlight the fact that the EU flag is sitting beside the Ukraine flag there.
I did. Yeah, on my tour out on my way in, I noticed a few things in there, and it was a little bit shocking. The presence of Ukraine is everywhere in the European Parliament here. I've got a great video actually, just where I can talk over But it was in the previous
Sorry.
slide. There it is. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Okay. There we
it's
go.
in the
I don't
previous
know.
slide. There's a video. I think there it is. That's the one. Yes. Yeah. It's so this is what you see in the rotunda: safe internet, ban on ads targeting children. That's online safety. No more gas for Putin. This is the courtyard as you walk into the European Union. Energy independence, building Europe's autonomy from Russian fuel. To all workers, fair minimum wage by the end of 2024. At the latest, democracy in action. That's it. The European Parliament. And this was my personal favorite here. Defending democracy. We will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes. And breakthrough women will have a fair chance at top jobs, because somehow women aren't accessing top jobs. So that plus all the net zero carbon propaganda, and that's basically like literally walking into the building. It is the level of propaganda is like something that is incredible. Not even Soviet times they could even hold a candle to the EU. They don't even stylize it. It's just raw gaslighting. It's
Yes.
pretty incredible.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. Now, Debbie, welcome to the program. And we're going to get started off here talking about patient safety.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And yes, Dr. Henrietta Hughes at last has got a website. And I would like everyone, please go and have a look at her website. This is the front page. And she says she's there to listen to patients, which clearly we know that she's not doing. But she also highlights Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. It's apparently staggering her that there's a patronising approach to patients. So let's go and have a look at the report. And this indeed was just brought out in June. And I thought I'd just go and have a look at inside very quickly. I just want to really direct people to this to go and actually have a look at it. So that let's see what they found. The forward includes a few findings: failure to make the right diagnosis, delays in providing treatment, poor handovers between clinicians, failure to listen to the concerns of patients or families. I mean, the report is called Broken Trust, Making Patient Safety More Than Just a Promise. And clearly this is a damning indictment. And I just put a screenshot of a few of the findings in the comments that you can freeze the screen. And you can see there, look, lack of support to navigate systems in the aftermath of an incident, failure to make the right diagnosis, inadequate apologies, unsatisfactory learning responses. Clearly, all of these reports are coming out and nobody appears to be learning anything. But one thing you can find on Dr. Henrietta Hughes's website, if you want to, go to her conference, which she's holding on patient safety in September. But I will warn you, thank you to Cheryl for pointing it out, it will cost you £699 to attend. Also on Dr. Henrietta Hughes's website is Dr. Alison Cave's blog. Yes, she's writing a blog, and she's writing a blog on about pretty much the value of submitting a yellow card. And we all know the reality of submitting a yellow card. So what does she say? She says, once a yellow card report has been submitted by a patient or healthcare provider, it is carefully analysed by our safety experts, who include doctors, pharmacists, scientists, and medical device specialists. Their analysis involves an assessment of the data to determine if the reported event may be a safety signal associated with a medicine or medical device, or it would have occurred anyway without medical treatment. This is because the nature of yellow card reporting means that the reported events may not be side effects or adverse incidents. It is important that everyone continues to report, even if they are unsure of if their reaction is associated with the medicine or medical device. And then she goes on to say that they have a two-way system of communication, but clearly that two-way system of communication is just between the MHRA and their scientists, of which we know they've only 40. There doesn't seem to be any patient interaction. So the Patient Safety Commissioner website exists. Please go and have a look at it and look at that report. Now, jumping on very quickly to the NHS, I'm not going to stay too long on the NHS this week, even though we should all be singing happy birthday to it, because I'm going to devote my next week's blog to the birth of the NHS 75 years ago, and this week we seem to be having party celebrations to perhaps celebrate the death of the NHS as I see it. But of course, Rishi Sunak, there's been lots of stories this week. Rishi Sunak and Steve Barclay have been jeered and they've not had a good reception, but they've decided to give the NHS, as we know, a present of a massive workforce. Now, before we get too excited, let's look at this workforce, and they're pledging that it should grow by almost 1 million by 2036. And I'm not quite sure who they're going to be training, but it seems to be that the training is going to be reduced for most professionals. And I thought, anyway, the NHS was being taken over by robots. And to celebrate the birthday of the NHS, what better article to have than The Independent this week, which says that the NHS is collapsing. And these are leading medics apparently sort of staying in a corridor now is the norm. So on the week we should be celebrating and MPs are doing runs and goodness knows what, it's far from a birthday. It's probably a funeral. And thank you very much to a tweet that was sent to me indicating that Southampton Hospital, all of a sudden, the public land of which the NHS hospital is on appears to have been sold with no public consultation. Now there are ANPR cameras being assembled and it appears to be private land. So if anybody knows any more about that, do let us know.
Okay, Debbie, thank you very much for that. Let's change topics again. And Patrick, let's move on to Ukraine. You're muted, Patrick.
Let's just do a little important update here. There was a lot of talk, it kind of ramped up at the end of June, about Russia wanting to attack itself at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And this, you see, this Zelensky was tweeting at all the U.S. media, British MPs, reporters, all crowing the same script talking point that this is coming. So here's Luke Harding, the mercurial journalist, I guess you could call him, for The Guardian. And this is him right July 4th, just a couple of days ago. You can see he's standing opposite with his Russian-held nuclear power plants, saying the situation at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant behind me yesterday is alarming. Kiev says the Russians have placed explosives today on top of the reactors, 3 and 4, ahead of a possible false flag operation. Russian telegram channels report imminent Ukraine attack. This is like a double reverse psyop here. And so with Luke Harding, the man who fabricated so many stories, including that Paul Manafort visited Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy multiple times, and that story was never retracted by The Guardian. Luke Harding, there he is right here on screen. This is Luke Harding, and so I would call this a false flag alert. I don't know. Are we on the Luke Harding slide still?
No, we've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we got to, okay. Right. Sorry, you threw me off there. Okay. So what slide are we on now?
So we're on to the FT and military briefing.
Right. Okay. So this is from the Financial Times, and you can see the cynicism in this headline here. Military briefing: Ukraine provides the ideal testing ground for Western weaponry. So what are we talking about? All sorts of dangerous weaponry, including depleted uranium, and what we'll come on to in a second, which is cluster bombs. But just the cynicism in this Financial Times article by Roman Olian, I can't pronounce his last name, unfortunately. But the cynicism in this article is just astounding, absolutely astounding. So moving on to the next slide. So here, this is the setup for the cluster bomb story, which we're getting here. This was an exclusive at CNN. You can see Zelensky is completely half cut in this exclusive interview. I don't know how you can call anything exclusive with Zelensky, because he's doing photo ops and interviews on multiple segments per day. So he's saying that the counteroffensive should have started much earlier to preempt Russian defenses. So apparently the counteroffensive still hasn't gotten off the ground yet, unfortunately. So we've got a little clip from Zelensky around the same time, and just the vitriol, the unhinged nature of what he's saying is unbelievable. Let's watch this and read the subtitles.
Що повинна робити НАТО. Унеможливлювати застосування Росією ядерної зброї. Але, що важливо, я ще раз звертаюсь до міжнародної спільноти. Як це було до 24-го? Превентивні удари, щоб вони знали, що з ними буде, якщо вони застосують, а не навпаки. Чекати ядерних ударів Росію, щоб потім сказати, ах, ти так, ну ось тримай від нас. Переглянути застосування свого тиску. Ось я вважаю, що повинна робити НАТО. Переглянути порядок застосування.
Wow.
I mean, how did you translate that, Mike? Because it sounded to me like he's saying that NATO needs to preempt and with what? NATO nuclear weapons or attacks in Russia? How did you read that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hugely dangerous statements to be making. There's a hint of desperation there, more than a hint, perhaps. But if you take that in the context of what the Polish government have been saying in the last week or so, where they're saying, well, because Putin has placed nuclear weapons in Belarus, we need American nuclear weapons on Polish ground. This escalation is getting, the insanity of it is getting off the charts, really.
Yeah, yeah. So right. So here, Lindsey Graham's, of course, revving it up as well, saying he's totally cheering on CNN's interview with Zelensky and saying that this is basically proof that we need to give ATA CMS cluster munitions and, of course, the F-16s to Ukraine so they can win against Russia. Half measures are maddening and only continue to prolong the war and its suffering. So the rhetoric is completely backwards on this, as you can see. And so that's, of course, no surprise there. So this is the controversy of the week. Biden, the difficult decision of whether to give weapons banned by many U.S. allies. What weapons are we talking about here? Well, of course, we're talking about cluster munitions. So cluster bombs, effectively. So Biden has come under steady pressure from Zelensky, who argues that the munitions, which disperse tiny deadly bomblets, are the best way to kill Russians who are dug into trenches and blocking Ukraine's vaunted counteroffensive to retake its territory. So again, this is the wonder weapon of the week. Okay, it was F-16s one week, it's Leopard tanks the other. Now it's like we need cluster bombs, and this is what's keeping this much anticipated counteroffensive from happening. We just need more cluster bombs here. So Biden's coming under pressure from Zelensky, and so this is, well, looks like a repeat. Is that a repeat of the previous text?
Uh,
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that was meant to be another quote. Anyway, so America needs to send illegal weapons, banned weapons, to Ukraine in order to win the war. Apparently, so if it's cluster bombs this week, it'll be something else next week. And so, if you want to get a little more of a deep dive on this, I'm having a long discussion with international human rights lawyer from France, Arnaud Devillet, who's in Russia at the moment, and about these banned weapons and what the various legal statuses are, and whether they're going to make a difference in this. That's on TNT Radio, as you can see on screen here. That's Monday to Friday, 5 p.m. Till 7 p.m. Just go to www.tntradio.live. I'll be doing that this evening.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much for that. Now, in the meantime, of course, the NATO conference in Vilnius is, well, the opening remarks from Jens Stoltenberg happened about an hour ago, or an hour and a half ago. And, well, they're very excited about it, not least because, of course, Jens Stoltenberg has been, or had his position extended for another year. So NATO allies agreed on Tuesday to extend the mandate of Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg by a further year until the 1st of October 2024. The decision will be endorsed by the NATO heads of state and government at the Vilnius summit. I think the main action is starting next week, but in the meantime, the leaders of Sweden and Finland and Turkey have been there for meetings to try to discuss whether they can get over this sort of impasse with Turkey over membership and so on. Well, in the meantime, of course, Zelensky will be speaking as well. Now, he just want to reiterate what Patrick was saying about the Zaporozhye and the insanity of Zelensky's position on this, because as part of in the run-up to the Vilnius conference, he was absolutely saying that this false flag is going to happen. He's saying that, very importantly, the situation at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the whole world must now realize that common security depends entirely on global attention to the actions of the occupiers of the plant. So he intends to take this narrative with him to the NATO conference, and we'll see. We'll be reporting on that next week, of course. Okay, let's move on. And if you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there. You can pick something up at the UK Column shop, but please do share material you find on the various platforms, especially ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk. Now, we've got an interview with Cheryl Granger on the website at the moment. What did Pfizer know? A shot in the dark. Get over to that and share that as widely as possible if you can. Debi's blog is, the latest Debi's blog is on the website as well, and you can see the main topics being discussed there. We'd like to mention this Education or Indoctrination, Sex Education Age 3. This is at the Senate in Cardiff Bay on Tuesday, the 11th of July. This is Public Child Protection Wales with another public event meeting at 12 p.m. on Tuesday, the 11th of July, if you can get along to that. And then finally, we'd like to remind everybody that this evening at Glastonbury, the Great Net Zero debate is taking place. Begins at 17:45, so that's 5:45. Details on screen. If you aren't able to get to Glastonbury, we will be broadcasting that live on the UK Column in the usual places, so ukcolumn.org/live. And obviously, if you're a community member, you can find it on community.ukcolumn.org/live. Okay, let's move on. And we're looking at, speaking of green topics, Debi, lithium.
Yeah, anything but green. Your segment last week about the wind turbine exploding really sent shivers down my spine and alarm bells. So I went to look at this further. And let's look at the government's resilience for the future. Just as important as life sciences seems to be critical minerals, the UK has pockets of mineral wealth from the Scottish Highlands to the tip of Cornwall, and clusters of expertise in refining and material manufacturing. So as I'm in Cornwall, let's look at Cornish lithium, because Cornish lithium, there you can see a screenshot which will give you an idea of what do we use lithium iodide batteries for. And you can see we use them for everything, including, I might say, something else that's not on the list there, which is medical devices. So lithium is a big thing, although Cornish lithium, I have to say, are needing more investment. Apparently they're struggling. So I decided to drive up the road, only 10 minutes from my house. And there we have the British lithium pilot plant. And you can see the security there, but it's funded by Innovate. Let's remind ourselves who Innovate are. Innovate are a non-department government body sponsored by the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. So just knowing that I've got that up the road, I thought I'd drive up and I'd go and have a look at what was just 10 minutes up the road. Now, this is a silent video because when I actually got to the top of the hill, it's in Quarryland, and I didn't realise when I was speaking that the wind was absolutely howling, so you can't hear me. But I want you to know that there are significant environmental risks with mining lithium. It can be fatal for aquatic life. It can pollute the water. It takes 1 ton of lithium. To mine 1 ton of lithium, it takes 500,000 gallons of water. Now, this is Cornwall, and we're on a hosepipe ban here with South West Water, and yet this water contamination and the amount of water that needs to be used is pretty much unsustainable. It can also contaminate drinking water. So I was just staggered, really, because there were security gates, as you can see, absolutely everywhere, and you can't really see beyond the quarry. So I just thought I'd take that to show you. And then I wanted to show you the effects of what is coming out of the ground and where we're using lithium batteries. Now, there's an e-bike, according to the BBC, igniting every 2 days. These are in people's front rooms. And this isn't just e-bikes. These are other devices as well. So I thought I'd just put a couple of pieces of video together to show you what happens. Now, this video is silent, and the reason I've chosen these couple of videos is because nobody was harmed. But I'm sad to say that there are many deaths caused by charging up. And as you can see, it smokes for a while, and you think, oh my goodness, where's the smoke coming from? And then it suddenly exploded. So 5 seconds for the room to fill up with smoke. Here you've got a bus. You can see the start of the fire. It just starts to smoke, and then you get sparks everywhere. And then it literally just explodes. But this isn't just happening with buses. It's not just happening with e-bikes. There are plenty of videos online where phones are exploding in people's pockets, laptops are exploding. And some experts are saying that these batteries that are in these devices are literally incendiaries. So, and I know of a few youngsters that actually charge their phones under their pillows. So charging anything at night is a risk. And I just wanted to highlight that to you and highlight it to everybody, because I think all of us have got a smart device of one type or another.
Yeah, I mean, these are valid concerns. I mean, the issue of lithium-ion battery fires is a problem because, of course, they're extremely difficult to put out. And even if you have a fire extinguisher in your home for the kitchen or whatever, that is not going to help. So personally, I would not be charging anything in terms of e-bikes or similar products inside the house at all. And as you say, you've got to just keep an eye on phones and laptops. I mean, generally you get a reasonable, Debbie, you get a reasonable warning with these things because they start to swell. And if you've got a battery that's starting to swell and you're starting to see the shape of the phone or the back of the phone starting to swell out, you want to be getting rid of that phone as quickly as possible, getting the battery changed as quickly as possible. So these are reasonable points you make. So thank you for that. Now, Patrick, let's change topics again and move to the United States. And what's going on the border?
Well, the U.S. southern border immigration crisis, of course, we're all familiar with this. You've seen it in the news. And I'm going to highlight this excellent report here at the Gatestone Institute. Now, mind you, this is a partisan think tank, but the Gatestone Institute for International Policy Council. So more on the kind of right wing, if you will. But nonetheless, this is by a Turkish journalist who's a distinguished fellow at the Gatestone Institute. Uze Bulut is her name or his name. I'm not sure what they are, but we'll take the quote here. Whether intentional or not, can be argued that the U.S. government has become the middleman in a large-scale, multi-billion-dollar child trafficking operation run by bad actors seeking to profit off the lives of children. The HSS, that's the Department of Health and Human Services in the U.S., did everything they could to keep all of this silent. This is a quote here by Tara Lee Rodas, who's a testimony before the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Integrity, Security, Enforcement. This is just in the last April, just 2 months ago. Here's another, also quite a strong statement here. It's from a Florida grand jury testimony. Some of the children coming over the U.S. southern border, they're talking about here, are not children at all, but full-grown predatory adults. Some are already gang members or criminal actors. Others, I'm talking about children here, are coerced into prostitution or sex slavery. Some are recycled to be used as human visas by criminal organizations. Some are consigned to relatives who funnel them into sweatshops to pay off the debt accumulated by their trek to the United States. They're talking about here. Some flee their sponsors and return to their country of origin. Some are abandoned by their so-called families. and become wards of the dependency system, the criminal justice system, or disappear altogether. So again, from a Florida grand jury testimony, many of these key points, shocking points outlined in this piece here. And so I will go so far as to say, having also researched this closely, to say that I believe a lot of people are looking at these policies, open borders policies, especially under Democrats, and saying this doesn't make any sense. Okay, I understand turning Texas blue by getting Democratic voters over the border and naturalizing them, and hopefully they'll vote Democrat, but there's more to it. This kind of unfettered, kind of for organized crime, for criminal human trafficking cartels. I think that the Democratic Party might possibly be owned and bought and paid for by criminal cartels. That's the only way you can really describe the actions and decisions made by not just the White House, but also politicians in some of these states as well, who seem to be pro open border on this issue. So this is a huge problem. They're talking in this particular report, 85,000 children are missing. They've just gone missing, basically. You've got so many profiting stakeholders in here, from the foster care system to these charities that are running through churches as well. There's all sorts of potential stakeholders in here that might be the dependency system they're talking about, Mike. That's the child care system. It's very profitable. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and apparently this is a problem that's completely out of control. And I want to point to this week, July 4th was the premiere of this independent film, which is making a big splash at the moment, called The Sound of Freedom. This is starring Jim Caviezel, and this is making a lot of headway. It premiered on Tuesday, I believe. And so this is something that mainstream Hollywood doesn't really support, as far as I could see, for various reasons. They don't like these types of films that expose child trafficking for some reason. I don't know why. But we have the trailer to this film. Let's watch a little bit of the trailer to The Sound of Freedom. Looks like an incredible independent.
How many pedophiles you got?
288.
How many kids you found?
It is the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen. It has already passed the illegal arms trade, and soon it's gonna pass the drug trade. Because you can sell a bag of cocaine one time to a child 5 to 10 times a day. God's children are not for sale.
How long you been doing this?
12 years now.
How many pedophiles you got?
288.
How many kids you found?
Timoteo, tú rescatas niños, ¿verdad? ¿Puedes ayudarme a encontrar mi hermana?
Te lo prometo.
So, Patrick, the thing that strikes me about this is that we've been reporting about children going missing in the UK regime for the last lot of years. I mean, a lot of children coming in from Syria, from Libya, from other countries, just disappearing in the system. We've got war zones that the West has generally started across the world, where this kind of child trafficking has been going on. And now it's the southern border of the United States as well. This is, as this film seems to be suggesting, a massive industry now. And of course, we can't really separate the organ issue from that either.
Sure. Yeah. No, Ukraine being one of the big thoroughfares for this type of illegal activity. Nobody's wanting to talk about that, of course. That's totally verboten. But Jim Caviezel and Amira Sorvino, she's in this film. It's based on a true story. So it looks like a really good effort by then. I think it might raise awareness on this issue. So I think this issue is kind of coming up now to become a priority. But it's also in America. It's interesting. This is being characterized in a partisan way. The left, the kind of woke left, they're not really wanting to give any purchase to this type of film or this issue for some reason, because they see it as a right wing issue now, because a lot of right wing or pro Trump accounts are promoting it. So you can see how the partisan polarity in politics is even hitting something like this, which everybody should be interested in, that everybody should be supporting. this type of film and this type of exposure, but for the reasons of petty politics,
Yep.
it's not. So that's something to me is kind of shocking.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Let's move on to 9/11. And now, a couple of years ago, we ran a symposium on propaganda and 9/11 and so on. And one of the speakers at that was Matt Campbell. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we had Piers Robinson on the program talking about this website, International Centre for 9/11 Justice. And they've just posted this article, 9/11 family to seek judicial review of UK Attorney General's refusal of application for fresh inquest. So this is the family of Jeff Campbell, a 31-year-old British man who died on the North Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11th. So let's just have a look and see what they're saying here. That in August 2021, they submitted a 2,500-page application to then Attorney General Suella Braverman, asking her authority under the Coroners Act 1988 to apply to the High Court for a fresh inquest. Jeff's original inquest in 2013 had reached the conclusion that the impact of the airplane caused the North Tower's collapse, and it is this finding that we aim to overturn. Last week, after nearly 2 years of waiting, we received the very disappointing news that Solicitor General Michael Tomlinson, acting on behalf of Attorney General Victoria Prentice, refused our request for the Attorney General's authority to apply to the High Court for a fresh inquest. The Solicitor General contends that it is reasonable for the coroner to rely on the findings of the FBI and the 9/11 Commission, but reasonableness is not an applicable legal test, rather its sufficiency. The coroner of Jeff's original inquest heard no evidence whatsoever that is capable of supporting the conclusion that the impact of the airplane caused the North Tower collapse. Legally speaking, to state a conclusion for which no evidence is considered is the very epitome of insufficiency of inquiry. The Solicitor General also argues that the expert and eyewitness evidence of the pre-planted explosives that is an explanation for the tower coming down is unlikely to yield a different conclusion, yet the law in this matter is clear. We're not required to prove that a different conclusion is likely in order to be granted a fresh inquest, only that a different conclusion is possible. The refusal of our application on this ground is in direct contravention of the law. So they go on to say the Solicitor General also irrationally asserts that assessing whether the Twin Towers collapsed due to pre-planted explosives is beyond the scope of an inquest. The Attorney General's incoherent refusal of our application is a miscarriage of justice and a cruel obstruction of our search for the truth about Jeff's death. Therefore, we seek judicial review of the Attorney General's legally deficient decision before the 3-month deadline of September the 27th, 2023. Now, they're asking for some financial assistance to help fund this judicial review, and you can get details of that on the International Centre for 9/11 Justice website. And if you want to discover a little bit more of the background to this, do watch Propaganda 9/11 and the Global War on Terror, the symposium that we ran. It's on the front page of the UK Column website, about 2/3 of the way down. If you have a look at that, there are many other presentations there as well. Patrick, very briefly, any thoughts on that?
No, not anything other than Matt Campbell and his family have been fighting this now for years. So, over 10 years at least, maybe 15, 20 years. So it's just taken a whole lot of their lives to try to get some clarity and justice on this.
Yes.
And I think if there's any way to support them, or I'm not sure if they're still running their crowdfunding for legal fees and so forth, it's a worthy cause because they are absolutely dedicated and they've taken this all the way.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, Debi, let's come back to you and the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, you'll all be relieved to know there's a new report. So there's a flagship report, the top 10 emerging technologies of 2023. So it was only just published in June. So let's flip through and see what those technologies are. Number one, you'll be reassured after my previous segment on batteries. We're looking at putting batteries into your clothes, into medical devices, basically all e-textiles and healthcare. So smartwatches, sensors, shirts, you name it. The next one, generative artificial intelligence. Basically, that's machine learning, but it's using the human brain and machines to develop drugs. So drug design on that one. The next one is sustainable aviation fuel. So they can't replace the fleet, you can't replace the aircraft. So what better way than to actually use sustainable fuel? So this is what they're planning between 2022 and 2050. And worryingly, the next one is design of phages. Doesn't that look inviting? Now, this is well, I'll let you read it and freeze the screen, but phages basically are viruses that infect specific types of bacteria. This isn't a way to reprogram phages and basically play about with our microbiomes. So this is another of their emerging technologies. Then we've got the metaverse, and we're going to be going into the metaverse. If we've got mental health problems, you can go into multiple mental health metaverses. So there isn't going to be just one. So you can interact with a professional, or you can interact socially. Then we're going to be getting something called wearable plant sensors. So we're jabbing our plants now. These are micro needles that will go into plant leaves or stems. And it's going to be a way of farmers monitoring crops if they've got any left. And it's going to be real time adjusting, irrigation or whether they need to put fertilizer on. Then we go on to a new word that I hadn't discovered before, spatial omics. Now, this is apparently molecular mapping of biological processes to unlock life's mysteries. Basically, it's slicing brains so that they can see cellular architecture that's never ever been seen before. They're going to start off with mouse brains, but you can see where this is going. And then we can go into flexible neuroelectronics. So it's rewiring us using circuits to interface with our nervous systems. They're going to be using machines, the machines that can use their own thoughts. The machines will have thoughts of their own. And these are going to be used in prosthetic limbs too. Then we come to something called sustainable computing, which is all about heat management systems. So how can we use heat from all of these data centers to heat homes? And they're piloting this in Stockholm. And they're using Google data centers as an experimental testbed, I believe. And then lastly, AI facilitated healthcare to improve efficiency of healthcare systems. This is going to be integrating more AI into healthcare to anticipate future pandemics. So again, we've got this pandemic preparedness going on ahead, but go and have a look at the WEF flagship report.
Patrick, I don't know if you've got any thoughts. I mean, how do you see their vision of the future?
I don't know. I just think it's crazy that you need giant Google data centers to tell people how to heat their homes. I wonder how much so-called CO2 is produced by these giant data centers that are providing all this AI brain power so that we could figure out how to turn dials. I don't know. It's crazy. They're still chasing me to put the smart meter in.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's come back to the UK and the Bank of England, because Bank of England's decided to weigh in on the issue of, well, gender identity and so on. And I suppose in the context of the number of people that are having bank accounts shut down at the moment. And I have to say, Patrick, we're getting emails on a daily basis now from more and more people that are saying, I'm having my bank account shut down, or I've had my bank account shut down. This is getting concerning.
Yeah, I don't know. Something's going on. The high-profile cases, of course, Nigel Farage, Lawrence Fox, to name a few. But anyway, they're having trouble grappling with inflation. Okay, but apparently they've got this one under control. The Bank of England say that people of any gender identity can be pregnant. There's an official statement this week by the Bank of England. Believe it or not, the Bank of England said that people of any gender identity can be treated as pregnant, as it pledged to dedicate a floor of its office to offering gender-neutral laboratories. So that's great. So safe space there at the Bank of England. Wonderful. So here's they're being pressured as well. The embattled central bank introduced a new family leave policy in June 2021 that included the gender-neutral term birthing parent, because obviously pregnant female is offensive, according to its 2022 submission to the charity Stonewall. So Stonewall is kind of policing all these institutions and organizations and generating these reports, which campaigns for gay, lesbian, transgender rights. So, these institutions, Mike, they've got a stark choice. They either adopt these language and policies, or they could have raging mobs protesting outside of their headquarters. Which one do you want? So the group has come under fire, talking about Stonewall here, for its controversial advice, including recently suggesting that many nurseries are not doing enough to help children recognize their trans identity at a young age. But apparently their efforts are paying off. Let's just look at this graph here. Trans patients diagnosed with gender dysphoria 5 years or younger. So the big one there, it's sort of, if you look at this graph, the numbers are going up vertically there on the left-hand side, and then the ages are along the bottom, okay, by year. That red peaking mark, the highest red mark, that is 2021. So as you can see, Mike, the age in which this is being diagnosed, gender dysphoria, is getting younger and younger, according to the data here from the British Medical Journal. This is a BMJ data report here. So, the work is paying off. They're getting more people to identify this transgender issue at a younger age. So is this a natural occurrence, or is this a result of pressure and the building up of this industry, all the counselors, the administrators, the teachers, pushing children to consider that they have a problem, that they're somehow born in the wrong gender? And so I think this is a contrived issue that has really become a result of massive social engineering that is well funded as well.
Yes, indeed. And in the meantime, Debi, the language continues to evolve.
Yes, it does. And this report in Fox News, a UK cancer trust suggests we call a vagina a bonus hole. This is Joe's Cervical Cancer Trust. So I decided to go and look at the trust, and they have actually designed a whole new language, a language to use when supporting trans men or non-binary people, using the correct language. So now let's go and have a look at what the correct language is. Apparently, I've just highlighted quite a few there. I'll just mention a couple. A bonus hole is an alternative word for the vagina. Dead naming is intentionally or unintentionally using the former name of a trans or non-binary person without their consent. You can also use the word front hole. I won't go on anymore, but to the next slide, you can see that we're also using the term microaggression as well. Brief behaviours, verbal or otherwise, that intentionally or unintentionally reveal bias or prejudice and make the target feel uncomfortable or distressed. And there are others. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, where does this end, Patrick?
Someone brought this up, the term dead naming. This is sort of like what cults do. You change your name when you enter the cult, and if you refer to somebody by their old previous life name, then the cult comes and sets upon the individual to set them straight, that sort of thing. So, I mean, there's huge problems with this. Obviously, you're looking at something more akin to a religion, I think, a secular religion that's kind of, meld together with a social engineering agenda. So this is why we're seeing this stuff being pushed so hard. So yeah, I don't know where it ends, Mike, but it's getting ridiculous. But hey, that's just my opinion, and I'm not a doctor. I'm just a pundit.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Well, look, thank you very much to Patrick and Debi. We're going to leave it there for today. We'll be back in a few minutes for some extra. If you're a UK column member, stick around for that. Otherwise, don't forget the Sandy Adams debate tonight at 5:45 on UK Column Live. We'll be back on Monday as usual for a news at 1 p.m. I hope everybody has a great weekend in the meantime. See you then. Bye-bye.